It seemed to me an absurd notion to cast a middle-aged, bald, English classical actor. A little bit now, but it still controls some of my decision-making and choices that I make.
The ending didn't come with an explosion. There was no final battle, no heroic sacrifice, no speech about saving the universe. Instead, it ended with a chair sliding back and a man finally sitting down. On May 23, 1994, millions watched the final moments of Star Trek: The Next Generation, never realizing they were about to witness one of television's most emotional endings. For 7 years, Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood strong, controlled, untouchable. Then, in silence, everything changed. At 72, Patrick Stewart finally revealed why that quiet moment shattered hearts. Because it wasn't about space or time or science fiction. It was about loneliness and the courage to finally let people in. The episode was titled All Good Things, and from the beginning, it signaled that this finale would be different. Time itself fractured, throwing Picard between the past, the present, and a bleak possible future. Overseeing the chaos was Q, the omnipotent being who had tormented humanity from the very first episode, now returning to pass final judgment. It was about Picard. Writers Ronald D. Moore and Brannon Braga faced a nearly impossible task. Paramount wanted something big. The upcoming feature film demanded momentum. Fans expected fireworks. But the writers understood something crucial. The soul of The Next Generation was never about explosions. It was about people. And more specifically, it was about a man who had spent his life holding everyone at a careful distance. For 7 seasons, Picard had been defined by control. While William Riker, Data, Geordi LaForge, Worf, and Deanna Troi gathered regularly around a poker table, laughing and bonding, their captain always declined. He stayed in his ready room, reading Shakespeare, sipping Earl Grey tea, and maintaining the invisible wall between commander and crew. This distance wasn't coldness, it was fear disguised as duty. Picard believed leadership demanded isolation. He made decisions that sent people into danger. Becoming too close felt irresponsible, even dangerous. Friendship, in his mind, was a luxury a captain could not afford. So he chose solitude, again and again, convincing himself it was necessary. That philosophy came directly from Patrick Stewart. When Stewart was first cast, he privately questioned everything. A middle-aged, bald, classically trained Shakespearean actor leading a science fiction television show felt absurd to him. He worried the role would define him forever. To protect himself, he leaned into formality, discipline, and restraint. He built Picard as a man who never revealed too much, never let emotions slip, never allowed vulnerability to compromise authority. Over time, small cracks appeared. Viewers saw Picard's love of archaeology, his strained relationship with his brother and nephew, brief romantic connections that never quite lasted. Each glimpse suggested a fuller human being beneath the uniform. But in the end, Picard always returned to his ready room alone. That's why the ending mattered so deeply. In early drafts, All Good Things ended the moment Picard solved Q's puzzle and saved existence itself. It was clean, logical, satisfying on paper, but something was missing. Patrick Stewart felt it immediately. He argued that after facing the collapse of time and reality, Picard needed to show real growth, not through speeches, through action. They added one final scene, a scene that would change television history. After the universe is saved, Picard quietly enters the room where the crew is playing poker, a ritual that had continued without him for 7 years. The conversation stops. The crew looks up in surprise. For a brief moment, Picard hesitates, unsure if he belongs there. Then he speaks. Is it too late to join? Riker smiles and answers with a line that feels heavier than any monologue. "You should have done this a long time ago." The weight of that moment is impossible to fake. When the scene was filmed, the emotions were real. The cast had spent 7 years together. They knew this was goodbye. Multiple takes were ruined because people couldn't stop crying. Stewart later admitted that when he delivered the line, "I should have done this a long time ago," he wasn't just speaking as Picard, he was speaking as himself. The final line, "The sky's the limit," seems simple at first. In poker terms, it means there's no maximum bet. But in context, it becomes something much larger. For 7 years, Picard had imposed limits on himself. Emotional limits, personal limits. When Star Trek: The Next Generation ended, Patrick Stewart publicly stated that he was finished with Star Trek forever. He feared being trapped as a science fiction icon. He returned to theater. He pursued independent films. Eventually, he found global success playing Professor Xavier in X-Men. For years, he refused every invitation to return. Cameos were declined, conventions avoided, offers ignored. He wanted distance from Picard, just as Picard had once kept distance from his crew. But time has a way of changing perspective. As Stewart grew older, he began to understand what Picard had meant to millions of people. More importantly, he began to understand what the character had meant to him. When CBS approached him about a new series centered on an older Picard, he initially said no. Then he heard the concept. The new series, Star Trek Picard, wasn't asking what a hero does at his peak. It was asking what happens after the adventure ends. What happens when the uniform is gone, when authority fades, when legacy is all that remains. Now in his 70s, Patrick Stewart has spoken openly about how his understanding of that final poker scene has evolved. He no longer sees it as a farewell. He sees it as the most important moment of Picard's life, the moment he finally chose connection over control. Late in life, Stewart remarried. He's spoken about discovering a happiness and openness he never allowed himself when he was younger. The parallels are undeniable. Like Picard, he spent decades behind carefully constructed walls, and like Picard, he eventually realized those walls were prisons. When Stewart watches the scene now, he says he cries every time. Because Picard wasn't just joining a game, he was choosing to live. That's why All Good Things is still considered one of the greatest television finales ever made. While Deep Space Nine ended with Ascension, and Voyager ended with Return, The Next Generation ended with something far more daring. It ended with vulnerability. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more untold moments behind television's most powerful legacies.